Well, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Rector's Forum. We continue exploring the Enneagram. Today, our topic is the type 1. So, just as a reminder, there are 9 types, and we will be going over each of those types in the following weeks. One thing to note, though, there will be a break next week for Labor Day. So, for those who might be traveling or out of town or and so forth and so on. So we'll break and then we'll pick up for several weeks, and then the only other break we'll have in this class, I believe, will be for All Saints Sunday. Otherwise we'll be continuing. So September 13th will be the type 2, September 20th will be the type 3, and so on and so forth. So today we're going to look at the 1, also called sometimes the perfectionist, sometimes also called the reformer. So even though I told you I would be relying heavily on the Rizzo Hudson book, the blue book that I was quoting last week, I did like Helen Palmer's overview of a 1 from her book, The Enneagram, Understanding Yourself and the Others in Your Life. She writes, 1s were good little girls and boys. They learned to behave properly, to take on responsibility, and most of all, to be correct in the eyes of others. They remember being painfully criticized, and as a result, they learned to monitor themselves severely in order to avoid making mistakes that would come to other people's attention. They quite naturally assume that everyone shares their desire for self-betterment and are often disappointed by what they see as a lapse of moral character in others. The perfectionist outlook is encapsulated in the image of our Puritan ancestors. They were hardworking, righteous, fiercely independent, and convinced that plain thinking and goodness would prevail over the shadow side of human nature. 1s are convinced that life is hard and ease must be earned, that virtue is its own reward, and that pleasure should be postponed until everything else gets done. I am not a 1. But maybe that sounds like someone that you know. Or maybe it sounds like you, if you're viewing out there, 1s or possible 1s, so forth and so on. There are a few other noteworthy lines that jumped out at me from Palmer's book. Quote, severely compulsive 1s can spend much of their relaxation time working to make themselves better people. Sitting on the bus going to work means practicing a set of posture exercises. Eating lunch means 10 chews per bite. And free time means doing something constructive and educational. A lot of 1s become teachers, by the way, if they aren't librarians. A few more lines from Palmer. 1s say that they live with the kind of severe internal critic that most of us would experience only if we had committed a serious crime. Even though they realize that the inner critic originates within their own thinking, there is a tendency to listen to the righteous internal commentary as if it had its origin in some higher plane of existence. A perfectionist's attention is so focused on the question of what should be done or what must be done that there is no mental space left for their own real wishes to emerge into awareness. The perfectionist worldview stems from an assumption that there is one ultimately correct solution for every situation. Interestingly enough, as I was transcribing this, I automatically typed There is no one ultimately correct solution. So read what you will into that about my worldview and my subconscious. Palmer goes on to explain that a one lives in a, quote, divided house, with a strong mental critic on one hand, but a cellar flooded with unrecognized, suppressed emotion on the other. She writes that these can be, quote, acted out in bizarre combinations, such as librarian slash prostitute, or missionary slash thief. So we all know about repressed things. They always come out in some form or another. Also, that really explains those librarian conferences I used to go to. And even, in fact, the Sigma Tau Delta English conference I went to one year, the wildest people were the librarians. They're just going to take off those cat glasses and take that hair out of a bun, and then it's party time, right? So now let's switch back to Rizzo and Hudson's work on the Enneagram from their book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. But let me refresh your memory about three things. The one's basic fear is of being bad, defective, evil, or corrupt. The one's basic desire is to be good, virtuous, in balance, to have integrity. And the one's superego, or the false message that they receive or that they tell themselves, is you are good or okay if you do what is right. Rizzo and Hudson write, ones have a sense of mission that leads them to want to improve the world in various ways, using whatever degree of influence they have. They strive to overcome adversity, particularly moral adversity, so that the human spirit can shine through and make a difference. They strive after higher values, even at the cost of great personal sacrifice. Ones are people of practical action. They wish to be useful in the best sense of the word. One, let me see. On some level, sorry, I had a little typo here. Again, not a one. I would have caught this if I were a one. So on some level of consciousness, they feel that they have a mission to fulfill in life, if only to try their best to reduce the disorder they see in their environment. Martha Stewart is a one. I would like to speak to the moral adversity part, though. Morality isn't just about sex and the like, so these aren't, repressed, sexual, prude kind of people. Morality could be animal rights, environmentalism, anything like that. So, you're not gonna, everyone isn't gonna be like offended by foul language on TV or something like that, but they might be deeply offended by factory farming, for instance. So things like animal rights, environmental issues, and the like, climate change, all of that could be the focus of a one's energy, for instance. Rizzo and Hudson write, ones come to rely heavily on their superego, a learned voice from their childhood to guide them toward the greater good that they so passionately seek. When ones have gotten completely entranced in their personality, there is little distinction between them and this severe, unforgiving voice. Separating from it and seeing its genuine strengths and limitations is what growth for ones is about. So just a reminder, the Enneagram, it's about our personality, and it's about how entranced we are by our personality, or how we use that personality as a vehicle to move towards essence or wholeness or growth, whatever you want to call it. So let's talk about childhood. An important sidebar in my Rizzo and Hudson book states, please note the childhood pattern we are describing here does not cause the personality type. Rather, it describes tendencies that we observe in early childhood that have a major impact on the type's adult relationships. So every Enneagram school that I know of teaches that our personalities, like other things, are inborn. It's just a part of us, but how it was nurtured. So how that nature was nurtured makes a difference in how entranced we are in these personalities. Ones work hard in their childhood to be good kids. They are serious, like little grown-ups. I picture them furrowing their brows often in childhood. In the family system, they play the role of the family hero. Ones usually feel disconnected from their protective figure in childhood. Often this is the father figure, but not always. In essence, this figure is not meeting the one's needs. This doesn't necessarily mean that this figure is abusive or bad or neglectful, but for whatever reason, the young one just doesn't connect or doesn't bond with this figure properly. So the one child becomes their own parental figure, imposing rules on themselves to be good. That way, nobody else will need to punish them because they will punish themselves. They will rigidly follow the rules. Now, in Enneagram teaching, each number of the Enneagram has a subtype. Rizzo and Hudson write, because the 9 types are arranged around in a circle, no matter what your basic type, you will have a type on each side of it. One of these 2 types will be your wing. The wing modifies and blends with the basic type and highlights certain tendencies in it. For example, if your basic type is 9, you will have either an 8 wing or a 1 wing. No one is a pure type, and in some cases we also find 9s with both wings. Most people, however, have 1 dominant wing. So for instance, I know we haven't discussed the 8 properly, but I would say that I'm an 8 with a 9 wing. That's why I'm an 8 that isn't always blowing up or burning down things when I don't get my way, because I have that peaceful, easy feeling of the 9 keeping me calm. But it causes, it's a conflict, because, I want to be the cool, calm spiritual director, but man, at root, I am not like that. That's hard work. So I aspire to be that 9 that is my wing. With that being said, it's time to explore the type 1's wings. Spread your wings or wing and fly. The one with a 9 wing is called the idealist. These are people who want to improve the world, but they have a more gentle demeanor than other ones. That is, they aren't the in-your-face, correct you in public type necessarily. They won't be out there checking the grammar in your Facebook comments. This is the more introverted wing, and anger, often heavily suppressed in a 1, is even harder to identify in this subtype. Their anger tends to come out as stiffness, impatience, and sarcasm. I know somebody who's a 1 with a 9 wing. I can say that's true. Some examples of this type, according to Rizzo and Hudson, are Plato, Gandhi, Sandra Day O'Connor, George Harrison, Henry David Thoreau, Martha Stewart, Katharine Hepburn, Al Gore, George F. Will, and Noam Chomsky. That kind of surprises me about Chomsky, though. He's really kind of in your face about what he believes. The 1 with a 2 wing, so remember, I don't know if I've even shared kind of the chart of the Enneagram with you. And I don't know if I have one large enough, but I should just show you how it works. So I'll show you out here in Facebook land first. So here is the little diagram. And at the top is the 9, and then around the 9 goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you can see being at the top, the 9 is its next door neighbors are the 1 and the 8. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to the wings. So here's our one diagram. I just realized I'm out here without a mask because I'm not a 1. So that's what I'm talking about, and those arrows will have a meaning that we'll come to later too. So let's see. Oh, I moved this. Okay. So the one with a 2 wing is called the advocate. This kind of one is less idealistic than the other type and more willing to get in the trenches to change the world. This wing is more vocal in their calls for reform. They are more extroverted and enjoy engaging with others. These are your politicians, some of them. Examples of this type, according to Rizzo and Hudson, are Jerry Brown, Hillary Clinton, Celine Dion, George Bradshaw, Emma Thompson, Jane Fonda, Joan Baez, Vanessa Redgrave, Ralph Nader, and John Paul II. So you can see a bit of a contrast between those figures and the other figures. Martha Stewart's not out necessarily on a crusade to make people's lives better, but she knows what a good thing is. Very calm. Now I'm going to add another layer of complexity, or let's call it depth, to the Enneagram type. And this one is called the instinctual variant. So Rizzo and Hudson write, in addition to the 2 wing subtypes for each point of the Enneagram, there are 3 instinctual variants for each type, indicating the different areas of life in which each type's particular concerns will be focused. A person's dominant instinctual variant represents the arena in which the issues of their type will most often be played out. The instinctual variants are based on 3 primary instincts that motivate human behavior: the self-preservation instinct, the social instinct, and the sexual instinct. And don't read too much into that last one again. Let me quote Rizzo and Hudson in each of these variants and see if we can get things as clear as mud. First, the self-preservation variant. Self-preservation types are preoccupied with getting and maintaining physical safety and comfort, which often translates into concerns about food, clothing, money, housing, and physical health. Next, the social variant. People who have a dominant social instinct are preoccupied with being accepted and necessary in their world. They are concerned with maintaining the sense of value they get from participating in activities with others, be they family, group, community, national, or global activities. Social types like to feel involved, and they enjoy interacting with others for common purposes. Finally, the sexual variant, and no, it doesn't mean you're a nymphomaniac, or sexy, or sex-obsessed. In the sexual types, there is a constant search for connection and an attraction to intense experiences. Not only sexual experiences, but any situation that promises a similar charge. In all things, sexual types seek intense contact. They may find intensity in a ski jump, a deep conversation, or an exciting movie. They are the intimacy junkies of the instinctual variants. So let's go back and apply these to the 1. So we've got the 1, and if you start digging a little deeper, you've got, one that's either has a little influence from the 2 or has an influence from the 9. And then all types will also fit into these instinctual variants. They will channel their oneness or their two-ness or their three-ness or whatever in a certain way, very usually. So about self-preservation ones, Rizzo and Hudson say, picture Felix Unger in The Odd Couple. They value cleanliness, order, hygiene, and aesthetics, and they are often preoccupied with health and diet, religiously subscribing to beliefs about vitamins, macrobiotics, homeopathic remedies, and so on. So, I know a few people like that. In fact, I know somebody that I thought was a 2 for years, but there might be a 1. They might be a 1 with a 2 wing, maybe. So more information on this variant. Self-preservation ones tend to worry about their material well-being both in terms of finances and health, and they often castigate themselves for not working hard enough, like an average 6 would. This self-preservation drives lends itself to gratification, but think about how this would be in conflict with the one's self-denial. So remember that librarian/prostitute example that Palmer gave. So this would be a fairly, if they're not healthy, again, there's also a wide spectrum of health and wellness, and mental health plays into this too. So not everybody is, a nut, like so divided and everything. But if there's if a one is under stress that is this type, then these are the sorts of things that they're going to be facing. So how about the social instinct variant? Rizzo and Hudson write, social ones believe that they represent objective values, social standards, and that they speak for others. Teaching, advocating, and moralizing can be part of the picture, but mostly about social issues and about rules and procedures. They are often interested in politics, current affairs, and journalism, and are adept at uncovering dirt, exposing wrongdoing, and speaking out against injustices. So finally, let's hear a description of the sexual one. Rizzo and Hudson write, sexual ones want a flawless relationship with an idealized partner. They long for the perfect mate, an unwavering source of stability in their lives. In this respect, they can be mistaken for 4s, and we'll get to 4s a few weeks from now. They have high expectations of their partner, their family, and their close friends, and want to believe that the other person in the relationship holds the same standards. Sexual ones fear that the other will fall short, thus destroying the harmony and perfection of the relationship. So you could see why a little Enneagram knowledge would be dangerous in terms of pastoral counseling, premarital counseling. When I use it and people read the possible conflicts, they're like, where did you get this? And you can write about those things. And if they've been previously divorced and you're writing a letter to the bishop to get permission to marry them, then it also comes in handy there. Though sometimes my letters sound more like psychological reports. Because I'll be like, well, because so-and-so is a 9, and this is, this is going on. The bishop's probably like, what is he writing? What does this mean? So do you see how the variants work? In this case, you have ones who focus on self-improvement, ones who focus on bettering society, and ones who are relationship-oriented. So the Enneagram is it's not a static, like to me, the Myers-Briggs, and I don't know it as well, so I'm judging it. I've used it, and I know my type, but it's kind of static. It doesn't really change. But here you have all of these different levels and these variables that you're always the basic type, but your type unfolds in different ways, like a fractal. I was talking about the Enneagram the other day, and I said, Snowflakes have patterns and clouds and atoms, so why wouldn't personalities be wonderfully created and have patterns too that you can observe? Okay, so now what I want to do is to read you some things I've underlined about this type that resonated with me, thinking about ones that I know in my life. They might make you think of people in your own life, or they might help you discern that you are a one. Before I do that, though, let's talk about health, namely emotional and mental health. Rizzo and Hudson provide a range of levels where people might find themselves: healthy, average, and unhealthy. Pretty easy to understand. So listen as I go down the list from healthy to unhealthy. An exercise like this might be tremendously helpful to you if you're a one, or it might help you identify issues in a relationship with someone else. So these are the levels, how the various levels of emotional and mental health can affect the type 1. So remember, all of these things we're applying to the 1 today. So at level 1, that is the healthiest level. You're accepting and wise. Nobody's here. They even write in Rizzo and Hudson, they're like, if you think you're in the healthy levels, you're probably operating out of the average levels. Like when we get into like 1, we're talking Gandhi, right? So ones let go of the belief that they're in a position to judge anything objectively and are able to approach life without emotionally reacting to it. They also paradoxically achieve their basic desire to have integrity and to be good. As a result of their self-actualization, they become wise, discerning, accepting, hopeful, and often noble. At the middle level of healthy, level 2, ones focus on the dictates of their superegos to guide them in life and defend them from the disordered parts of themselves. Their self-image is, I am sensible, moderate, and objective. And at the lower end of the healthy level, level 3, ones reinforce their self-image by trying to live their lives in accordance with their consciences and within reason. They are highly ethical and self-disciplined and possess a strong sense of purpose and conviction. Truthful and articulate, they teach by example, putting aside personal desires for the greater good. Now we get into the average levels, 4, 5, and 6. At the highest end of average, you have ones begin to fear that others are indifferent to their principles, so they want to convince others of the rightness of their viewpoint. They become serious and driven, debating others and remedying problems while evaluating their world and pointing out what is wrong with things. At the mid-range, ones worry that others will condemn them for any deviation from their ideals. Having argued their point of view, ones are now obliged to live up to it at all times, so they try to rigorously organize themselves and their world. They are punctual and methodical, but also irritable and tense. I know a few of those. Finally, at the lowest average of level, they're judgmental and critical. Ones are afraid that others will mess up the order and balance that they've achieved, and they are angry that others do not take their ideals seriously. They react by reproaching and correcting others for not living up to their own standards. They are perfectionistic, opinionated, and sarcastic. And then you get into the lowest levels, and this is where we're getting into some serious like DSM, disorders, especially once you get to the lowest. So at level 7, the highest of the unhealthy levels, ones fear that their ideals may actually be wrong, which may be true. To save their self-image, they attempt to justify themselves and silence criticism. They are closed-minded and allow no compromises or negotiations in their positions. They are bitter, misanthropic, and highly self-righteous. At that middle level of unhealthy, ones are so desperate to defend themselves from their irrational desires and impulses that they become obsessed with the very parts of themselves they want to control. They begin to act out all of their repressed desires while publicly continuing to condemn them. They cannot stop themselves. And at the very lowest level, the most serious, the realization that they have lost control of themselves and are doing the very things they cannot tolerate in others is too much for unhealthy ones. They try to rid themselves of the apparent cause of their obsessions in themselves, others, or the environment, possibly resulting in self-mutilation, murder, or suicide. So you can see how that perfectionism, at the highest level can drive such, great things. But as we know, awfully terrible things can come from that as well at the other end. So those are some of the levels of health.
Are the levels of health fluid when you go from like a 4 to a 5?
Oh yeah. You would have to, because you can't stay at the, and you probably move, all of us here are probably in like maybe the average levels. Maybe on a really good day we might hit, in the healthiest level. In the healthy section. And so I would say from day to day you're probably sliding. Except, once you reach that very bottom level, you're probably not moving very much. You're pretty rigid and flexible, and it's time to seek help. Or it's time for somebody to seek help for you. That's just, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. So that's we're talking serious mental disorder down there. Let's see. Okay, so here are some observations that Rizzo and Hudson had made about ones that might resonate with you. So I just kind of went through the chapter, and some of these things I underlined, I'm just going to quote because they kind of encapsulated the one for me. And I'll do that for all types on the appointed day. Ones can grow tremendously simply by recognizing and being aware of their particular wake-up call, a heavy and constant sense of personal obligation. They begin to think that it is up to them to fix whatever mess they encounter. If I do not do this, no one else will. So that's your wake-up call in answer to your question about sliding. When you get to that point, when the one's like, the whole world's on my shoulders, I have to clean this whole mess up, blah, 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 that's like their red flag that says you're sliding down the scale. You're sliding into the unhealthy levels, and you stop. The thing about the Enneagram, though, and this is good for ones who are already perfectionistic, is that the Rizzo and Hudson, at least in this book, teach sometimes it's simply enough to observe yourself, to see this happening. So it's not you're sliding down the scales. It's just stop, observe yourself doing this, and say, okay, this is where I stop. This is where it stops, right here. I see this. So I get the Ennea thought of the day, which is a daily reflection on your type every single day of the year. And a lot of it is just about, have you noticed yourself doing this today? So it's a self-awareness tool. Now, note that, what I just described, this is different than a two's motivation. We'll talk about the two's week after next. Their motivation, the one's red flag is, if I do not do this, no one else will. I'm responsible. I'm perfect. The two is, if I do this, I'll be loved. If I don't do this, I won't be loved. They come from different places, and we'll flesh that out some more week after next, the 13th. All right, so continuing with these kind of notable, quotable one things. In the average range, ones begin to define themselves in the social role of the educator or the teacher, the person whose place it is to instill wisdom in the ignorant, uplift the fallen, and show others how to do something useful and productive in their lives. Ones feel that they must work overtime to make up for others' sloppiness or laziness, and so they often fail to take adequate care of themselves. Their irritation and impatience, however, make it extremely difficult for average ones to communicate their suggestions to others in a non-threatening way. What average ones do not seem to understand is that while their own habits and methods might be very effective for themselves, they may not be appropriate for other people. So maybe you've been lectured by one of these vitamin junkies, or somebody's come up and preached to you the gospel of kombucha or something, of this kind of tea, or oh my God, I can't believe you put gluten in your body. That's a possible one. And I say possible because anybody can be a jerk, overly solicitous. But this is an enduring pattern. The anger of ones is directed both at themselves for failing to live up to their ideals and at others for what ones see as their laziness and irresponsibility. As ones become more unhealthy, they displace more of their anger onto others as they make themselves the sole judge of who and what is right and wrong. Ones have learned that to be loved, they must be good, and to be good, they must be right. This behavior manifests as a continual need to point out errors or a better way of doing things. So you can see the one teacher of diagramming sentences, doing those sorts of things. Putting order on the world. I'm going to take your essay and I'm going to impose order on it, which all writing teachers have to do, but ones are particularly adept at that. Ones typically feel that there is only so much time in the day, or in their lives for that matter, and that they need all of it to accomplish their missions. As they become more strict with themselves and unforgiving of their errors, average ones cannot help but dwell on their shortcomings. Some of their defects are too painful to face and are quickly repressed too. Average ones are highly sensitive to criticism. This is not particularly surprising given their background of constant self-criticism. So any further negative feedback from others can be extremely threatening. So I dealt with an average one in a previous life, we'll say, and they said, such and blah, 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 and all I did was just suggest another way. Well, why didn't I just do this? You would think I had just pulled down my pants and crapped right on this person or something. It was an extreme, volatile reaction. And this is a very unhealthy person, of course, but it was just, it wasn't, it was not I didn't think it was threatening in any way, it was just okay, well, what about this? And, okay, oh my God, no, this did not fit my view of how things should be, and just things disintegrated from there. So there's one last facet of each personality type that you should know, and that is that under stress, all types disintegrate into acting like another certain type, and when they're healthy or integrated, they become more like the best qualities of another type. I know that sounds nuts, so let me put it in the context of the one. And actually, before I even do that, I'll use myself as an example. So as an 8, when I'm truly healthy and moving along the levels of health, I become more like 2, become more open and giving and helping and that sort of thing. But as I find myself in situations of stress, I become more like a 5, the thinker, and so I withdraw, become kind of reclusive, brooding, that sort of thing.
So that in the diagram as to how.
Yeah, in fact, I had it in here as a note to myself at some point to show the diagram. So again, all of the numbers here are connected. So you can see that the 1 is connected to the 4 and the 7. So we're talking about the Yeah, the 1. So the 1 will become more like a 7 when they're growing towards growth, and more like a 4 when they're disintegrating to stress. And I'll give you some examples of that and talk about that. But you have all these, the connections are showing those areas of growth and disintegration. Um, so, um, when a 1 is under stress and becoming unhealthy, they tend to act in ways that remind people of an average type 4. They are so worn out by this facade of being perfect and all the work that they put into it that they long to escape, daydream, maybe even fantasize about a forbidden romance. So the 4s are called the romantics. They're the artists and the daydreamers, and so the 1 starts to, not in a healthy way, embrace that. It's more like a pressure valve is opened up and it's just blowing out. So Rizzo and Hudson write, in the lower levels, the move to 4 can lead ones into growing self-indulgence and a willingness to give themselves a few exceptions to their own rules. After all, no one has been working as hard as they have. Who could fault them for having a few drinks or a steamy illicit romance, while publicly condemning that very thing? So, and that's why it's unhealthy. Again, it deals with sort of this repression. Here is the danger zone, though. So where do ones go? Oh, sorry. What did that mean by that? Let's see. Oh, I see what I meant. I have a note to myself here. So here are some the warning signs Rizzo and Hudson use that are leading to these really lower levels. Potential pathology would be obsessive compulsive disorder, depressive personality disorder, eating disorders, crippling guilt, and self-destructive behaviors. And so the warning signs are, so the red flag or the 1 in trouble, taking rigidly inflexible positions, extremely self-righteous and very judgmental, rationalizing and justifying their own actions, intense feelings of disillusionment and depression, outbursts of rage, intolerance, and condemnation, obsessive thinking and compulsive behaviors, and periods of masochistic self-punishment. So that's when you're slipping to the unhealthy levels, but also you can see how that kind of corresponds to that disintegration, to that area of stress. So they're getting rigidly inflexible and becoming more and more entranced with the way things should be. Something's got to give, and something will. So it's gonna blow. Now, so where do ones go when they are integrated and healthy? They become like healthy 7s. 7s are the adventurers, the epicures. You'll note these I already told you. So you'll note the connections if you look at the Enneagram symbol. So if you're at home, you want to look that up later, just look up Enneagram and it's always there. Hopefully most of them will be labeled for you. So basically, if they're growing, if they're moving towards their area of integration, they're still 1s, but they're less opinionated and more open to whatever life brings them. They don't abandon their moral compass as in the unhealthy levels. So you see that even though they become like another type, that's not a good way that's not growth. They're abandoning their ideals, and instead, when you're growing, when you're moving towards your area of growth, you're transcending those. I think transcending is probably the best word. So they don't abandon their moral compass as in unhealthy levels, but they're more relaxed and comfortable wherever they are. They can unclench their jaw, loosen up, maybe resist correcting somebody's grammar on Facebook. Instead of judgment, they practice discernment. Can you see how those two would be different? So just let the connotations of those words roll over you for a moment. Judgment versus discernment. They mean the same thing in some ways, but they're very different. They're a very different approach. You don't go to the judgment committee to become a priest, though it might feel that way sometimes. You go before a discernment committee. So discernment is, maybe we call it holy judgment. Well, this, as I've said before, is an ambitious undertaking, kind of what we're doing here. I hope that I've at least outlined characteristics of most ones for you and shown you some of the variations that can be found within a single type. We'll see this in all of the types that we explore together. So I'll go through the chapter as I've done and summarize and quote and pull from Palmer and do the same thing with all the other types. So we'll look at the basic type. We'll look at the possible variations of the wings of that type. We'll talk about average and healthy and unhealthy levels and so forth and so on and so on. We're going to have a Labor Day break next week, but we'll return on the 13th with the type 2, commonly called the helper. So if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to contact me. Also know that there are some wonderful and funny YouTube videos out there that provide a lot of great information about individual types. And there are some good web resources too. I would only caution that you don't stray too much from people like Palmer and Rizzo and Hudson. The Enneagram isn't something that can be encapsulated in a BuzzFeed quiz. It can't even be fully captured in this 10-week course. But what you'll learn about 8s is that we like a challenge. So I've tried to fit it. Were there any questions or comments or observations, connections? Did we have anything on Facebook? I don't get, for some reason my comments don't show up but on my screen here, and I don't know why that is. They just disappeared one day.
Josh.
Yeah.
When were the Enneagrams, when did that first come into being? Because I'm comparing a lot of what you're saying to things that I teach, like Maslow's hierarchy, wellness, illness continuum, and even some into Erickson's stages of growth and development. So is the Enneagram program, or what am I trying to say?
Yeah, the Enneagram typology.
Yeah. Did this come later on? Maslow's.
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is sort of no and yes. So the Enneagram was sort of based on, some kind of ancient traditions, numerology, that sort of stuff. But then people have come along and perfected it. So Rizzo and Hudson were probably doing their work in the 60s, 70s, maybe. And so you could see that, this is kind of an application of this is called the Complete Guide to Psychological and Spiritual Growth. So this book deals with some of the psychological aspects of it. But I have books that also deal with other aspects. But I would say, yeah, they're going to draw, some of these insights maybe came to be applied to the Enneagram later based on some of those things that you're talking about.
It sounds so much like combinations of those things.
Yeah. Well, clearly somebody's read the DSM to know what the pathologies would be. So the Enneagram was around centuries before the DSM, but that modern insight has been applied to the Enneagram. So it's kind of a both-and answer to the question. So ancient, but still relevant, and modern, modern psychological principles and behavioral principles and things have been applied to it. And they might change. that's kind of one of the cool things about being open to modern insights. So there might be some completely new thing that we can't even conceive of that will be invented sometime in our lifetimes, and then somebody might look at that. We'll call it Sally's chart. I can't even conceive of it. So it's Sally's system, and then somebody would be like, okay, well, I could see how this would apply, and then they would just write a book called The Enneagram According to Sally's System.
Well, even Maslow went back, and 20 years after he first recognized, put it into being, he went back and added 2 more things to the top tier, and one of those was self-transistence.
Yeah. And systems theory is something that continues to be built on. I've been reading a lot of books on it lately, and so it started as one thing, and now I read a book where they applied this lens to systems theory, and then somebody else applies this lens, so it's very much the same. But it's the same because maybe there is some kind of deep root wisdom or something that transcends all of these, and that's why we come to similar conclusions about these things.
I don't see any questions.
Okay, I did not. I saw a few comments of just people being here or there, so, and then I lost it. But that's all right. Okay. So anything else about ones? I always try to think about ones and on who would be a one on some TV show I've seen. Sometimes I'll sit and I'll type people. Lisa Simpson would be a candidate from The Simpsons, but I also think she has some very 3 tendencies. But some days she seems a little more like a 1. So the vegetarianism and the animal rights and stuff. In fact, that might be an example. And I think that Marge is a 9. It's even keel. I can't think. Joan Crawford, especially Joan Crawford as Mommy Dearest. Is depicted as Mommy Dearest. That's a 1. The scrubbing and the beating because you're not right. The childhood, it's all there. So I would add Joan Crawford to that.
Think of libertarianism as a philosophy.
As a
type 1 to me.
See, I don't see that. I
It's
see
like this is the way the world works. Specifically, fiscally, specifically socially, and an ideological level.
I'd have to think about it some more.
Kind of like a self-preservation. Like all the examples you use seem to be like more progressive, like liberal. I was trying to think of people like more like conservative type ones, like how that would manifest.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of those people listed in the there weren't really any more. Well, often the people that are kind of more to the right in terms of politics, you'll find in the 6 category. But a 6 is, just as a type, kind of rooted in that kind of self-preservation. So I think people list Nixon maybe as a 6. Maybe a little bit of paranoia sometimes. So but I don't know, a perfectionist who is more right in the political spectrum, because I know we mentioned Clinton and somebody else. I think George W. would not be a 1. He's probably a 7.
HW.
George H.W.
I mean, you have to know more about him personally.
Yeah, I don't. I was so young when he was president.
Like very like rule following.
Well, rule following could be a 1, but it could also be a 6. So again, that's why I caution against the, if you hear one line in here, like, oh well, I'm a 1 because I like to organize my pantry. Well, 8s and 9s and 3s like to organize their pantry too. Or, I'm an 8 because I'm angry. Well, no, you might just have anger issues, but still be a 6. So it's
I can kind of see that though from, like that advocate type. Cause he instilled that, sense of, service and duty and his children and,
yeah.
those expectations with the rest of his family.
I was gonna look it up and see. Sometimes their list of people who might be a certain or not type is different on the website than it is in the book. Like the book just gives a few. What are my types? Type descriptions. Okay, so I'm gonna click on the one here. We still got another minute. 1, the reformer. And there's also a better image of kind of how the stress and the growth work and everything when you go to the website. The website is the EnneagramInstitute.com, EnneagramInstitute.com, and it's based heavily in the work of Rizzo and Hudson. They're the ones that put the test together that you take there, and I do encourage you to take that test. Okay, so here were some more. Margaret Thatcher. If you're looking for a more, right. Confucius. Joan of Arc. Sir Thomas More. Nelson Mandela. Prince Charles. Kate Middleton. Jimmy Carter. Michelle Obama. Al Gore. Hillary Clinton. Rudy Giuliani. Osama bin Laden. Hitler appears on the 8th, so if you're 1, don't be offended. We all have. There's, let's see, Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Let's see, so Ralph Nader, Chomsky, Bill Moyers, Keith Olbermann, Jerry Seinfeld. Bill Maher, Tina Fey, Meryl Streep.
So Thatcher and Mandela, at the same time.
Yeah, well, Hitler and Martin Luther King Jr. Because both, everything has a shadow side, or everything has there's the levels of health, and then there's the levels of unhealth, serious unhealth. Mr. Spock. SNL's The Church Lady. Good. All right, well, better disconnect now and get ready for the next thing that awaits. We'll pick up with the 2. You definitely, if you don't know 1s, you definitely know a 2 somewhere. That's especially in nursing. You definitely know a 2. The 2 is the, can I help you? Are you feeling okay? What can I do for you? Can I go get you a pizza? The overly solicitous, can't say no. I worked with 2s, and one of them was a bookkeeper that I worked with, and stressed all the time because she had 19 post-it notes because somebody had asked her to do something, and she said yes. Can't say no. Like, no. It just wouldn't. It's like, oh my gosh, no, I got to do this. I got to be helpful. So 2. I can't think of a public figure 2. I mean, we'll have a list week after next. But well, I can the housekeeper on Father Ted. Would you like a cup of tea? Are you sure, Father? Are you sure? I could get you. Oh, here, she just starts pouring the tea. Mrs. Doyle. That's her name. That's one that comes to mind. Hilarious. And then she gets with another housekeeper who's a type 2 also, and they get into a fight over who will pay for the check, and they're like rolling around the restaurant floor like, here's the ticket, no, here's the ticket. So it's funny stuff.